If you go to the comments section of any video about the housing crisis, you will see the same three words typed over and over again. Supply and demand. It's the standard economic answer. We have too many people and we didn't build enough homes, so prices went up. It sounds logical, it sounds clean, but when you actually dig into the data, supply and demand starts to look less like an explanation and more like a convenient excuse that hides what's really happening to your money. Here's the data point that nobody talks about. Right now, the US is facing a documented housing shortage of roughly 3.8 to 4.7 million units. That is true, but at the exact same time, the Census Bureau reports that there are 15.1 million vacant homes sitting in this country. That is more than 10% of our entire housing stock just sitting empty. So, how can we have a historic shortage and 15 million empty homes at the same time? And how did home prices jump 151% since 2000 when the population only grew by 17%? The math doesn't add up if you only look at supply. The truth is, we don't just have a housing crisis, we have a money crisis, we have a policy crisis, and we have a financial system that silently transformed your childhood home from a place to sleep into a speculative financial asset. So today I'm going to show you exactly why housing prices actually doubled and why the just build more argument is mathematically impossible to solve on its own, and what people our age can actually do about it right now. To understand why you can't afford a house, you have to stop looking at Zillow and start looking at the Federal Reserve. Let's go back to 2000. The median home price was $165,000. By 2024, that number hit $414,000. That is a 151% increase. Now, your parents might tell you, well, salaries went up too, and they did, but nowhere near that much. Since 1985, median household income grew 241%, but home prices climbed 408%. We have officially decoupled. In 2000, a house cost 4 times your salary. Today, it costs 7 times your salary. We are back to the exact same unaffordable levels we saw at the peak of the 2006 bubble. So what changed? The money supply. But the smoking gun is actually what happened between 2020 and 2022. During the pandemic, the Federal Reserve didn't just print money. They specifically bought mortgage-backed securities. They purchased $1.33 trillion worth of mortgage debt. Think about that number. That is unprecedented in American history. Here's how that actually works. The Fed buys mortgages from banks. This floods the banks with cash. The banks turn around and lower interest rates to rock bottom. We're talking 2.96%. This makes monthly payments artificially cheap, which allows prices to skyrocket because people buy based on monthly payment, not the sticker price. This wasn't a supply shortage driving prices up in 2021, it was a monetary injection. The correlation between the Fed buying these assets and home prices spiking it's nearly perfect. They essentially turned the housing market into a high-yield savings account for the wealthy, because when you print trillions of dollars, that money has to go somewhere, and it went into your living room. This leads us to the mystery that has confused every economist for the last 2 years. In 2022, the Fed realized they messed up. Inflation was getting high, so they jacked up interest rates faster than they have in 40 years. Mortgage rates went from 3% to 7%. Standard economics says when rates double, prices must crash, but they didn't. Prices plateaued, and in some markets, they even kept going up. So, why is this? It's called the lock-in effect. So remember all those people who bought or refinanced at 2.9% in 2020? They are now trapped in their homes. If they sell their house and buy a new one down the street, they have to trade a 3% mortgage for a 7% mortgage. Mathematically, that move would cost them an extra $300 to $500 a month for the same house, or even a worse house. So they just don't sell. This created a massive artificial supply drought. From 2022 to 2024, about 1.7 million fewer homes were sold because of this lock-in. This is the ratchet effect. Prices ratchet up when money is cheap, but they don't ratchet down when money gets expensive because nobody sells. So we are left in this weird purgatory where affordability is the worst it has been in history, because the monthly payments have doubled, but the sticker prices refuse to come down. Now we have to talk about the institutions, and I want to be very clear about something up front. I think what's happening here is fundamentally wrong. If you go to TikTok, you'll hear that Wall Street owns all the houses. I wanted to verify this, so I pulled up the data. Institutional investors, the big guys with 100 plus homes, actually own about 3.8% of single family homes in the US. Even Invitation Homes, the biggest player, owns roughly 0.1% of the market. So is the Wall Street theory a lie? No. It's just focused on the wrong target. While they don't own everything, they target specific neighborhoods, usually newer homes in high demand suburbs, and they have massive pricing power. When an institutional investor buys a home, they raise rents roughly 15 to 22% higher than a mom and pop landlord. They set the comparables for the whole neighborhood. Everyone else sees those rent numbers and they raise theirs too. But here's what really gets me. Those institutions aren't buying homes because they want to provide housing. They're buying them because they want yield, return on investment, right? They've turned your neighborhood into a dividend stream. And the bigger issue is what this does to the market overall. In 2024, nearly 33% of all homes were bought with all cash. That's roughly 1 in 3 homes being snatched up before a normal family can even get a mortgage approval. Who are these people, you may ask? Some are huge funds, but most are smaller investors, flippers, wealthy boomers, downsizing. This is the financialization of housing. It's no longer about shelter, it's about yield. And when 30% of the competition doesn't need a bank loan, regular people who need a mortgage to buy a home effectively gets pushed out of the market. You're not competing with your neighbor anymore. You're competing with private equity analysts in Manhattan who have $10 million to deploy. There's one final policy failure that nobody talks about. After the 2008 crash, regulators wanted to make sure we never had a subprime crisis again. So they tightened lending standards. Before 2008, about 2/3 of mortgages went to people with credit scores under 740. Today, that number is only 1/3. We effectively kicked 30% of the population out of the mortgage market. These are people with scores between 620 and 740, people who pay their bills, but the new regulators say no. This sounds safe, but it had a nasty side effect. Since these people can't buy, they are forced to rent. This drives up demand for rentals, which pushes up rents, which makes rental properties more profitable, which encourages investors to buy more starter homes to turn into rentals. It is a doom loop. We made lending safe for the banks, but we made housing precautious for everyone else. And here's the part that hits hardest for people our age: student debt. The average student loan balance is $37,000. That's more than double it was in 2007. And here's the impact. For every $1,000 in student debt you have, your likelihood of owning a home drops by 1.8%. 60% of millennials say student debt delayed their home purchase. 23% delayed by 5 years or more. And when people with student debt finally do buy, they spend 39% less on their homes than people without debt. So here's what happens. You graduate with $40,000 in debt, you spend your 20s paying it off instead of saving for a down payment. By the time you're ready to buy, you're 32 instead of 27. Home prices have risen another 20% in those 5 years. You're starting behind and you never catch up. Meanwhile, people without student debt buy at 27, build equity for 5 years, and have $50,000 to $100,000 more in wealth by age 35. That gap compounds over your entire lifetime. So let's zoom out. The reason housing prices doubled isn't just because we didn't build enough condos in San Francisco. It's because we print trillions of dollars that flowed into real estate. It's because we locked millions of people into golden handcuffs with 3% rates. It's because institutions treated houses like the S&P 500 instead of places to live. And it's because we kicked 30% of qualified buyers out of the mortgage market while letting cash buyers dominate. So can we fix it? We are seeing some hope. Minneapolis and Austin actually changed their zoning laws to allow more building, and rents there are finally softening. Supply does work, but it takes years. But unless we address the monetary side, the Fed's balance sheet, the financialization of homes, the lending standards that lock people out, building a loan is just putting a band-aid on a bullet hole. Now here's what actually matters to you. What can people our age do right now? Because waiting for policy to change is a luxury most of us don't have. First, understand the game has changed. Your parents bought when the price to income ratio was 4x. You're buying when it's 7x. That means you need different strategies. The old advice, save 20% down, buy a single family home in the suburbs, hold forever, doesn't really work anymore. You have to get creative. So there's house hacking, and that's the single most powerful tool available. Buy a duplex, triplex, or small multifamily, live in one unit, rent out the others, and the rent should cover most, if not all, your mortgage. You're building equity while living almost for free. FHA loans let you do this with only 3.5% down on properties up to 4 units. This isn't some get rich quick scheme, it's how people actually build wealth when prices are inflated. You're using other people's rent to pay down your mortgage. Second, look at the Midwest and South. I know everyone wants to live in Austin or Denver or Seattle, but Cleveland has a price to rent ratio of 12. Houston is at 5.4, and Memphis is at 12.9. These are markets where buying still makes sense mathematically. You can get a solid house for $150,000 to $200,000 in these cities, and if you work remotely, your San Francisco salary goes a lot further in Ohio. Third, fix your credit. I'm serious. If you're sitting at a 680 credit score, you're in that 30% that got locked out post 2008. Get to 740. Pay down your credit cards. Dispute errors on your report. Set up autopay so you never miss a payment. This isn't sexy advice, but a 60-point credit score increase can save you $200 a month on a mortgage over 30 years. That's $72,000. Fourth, consider non-traditional financing. Owner financing, where the seller holds the mortgage instead of a bank, is becoming more common. Assumable mortgages, where you take over the seller's low interest loan, are another option if you're buying from someone with a VA or FHA loan from 2020 or 2021. These strategies require more work, but they get you ahead around the 7% interest rate problem. Fifth, and this is controversial, but I'll say it, if you have student debt, consider pausing aggressive payoff plans and redirect that money to a down payment. The math depends on your interest rate, obviously, but if you're paying 4% on student loans and housing is appreciating 6% per year, you're losing ground by waiting. I'm not saying ignore your loans, I'm saying run the numbers and see if getting a house sooner makes more sense than being debt free later. Finally, build your income. I know that sounds obvious, but here's why it matters more now. When the price to income ratio was 4x, a $10,000 raise meant you could afford a $40,000 more house. Now that ratio is 7x. So a $10,000 raise means $70,000 more in house. Your income matters more than it ever has. Side hustles, freelancing, asking for raises, switching jobs for more pay, they aren't optional anymore if you actually want to own a home. So if this video has helped you out today, I encourage you to subscribe and leave a comment if you own a home or if you're someone young like me who's waiting, saving on a down payment. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this housing crisis and this affordability crisis and what you're planning to do about it in the future. And that's going to be it for this one.